the opportunity and indeed the honor to address you today. Let me just preface my comments with this one caveat. I'm going to talk a bit about my recollections of life 30 years ago. Others may remember these events differently. Some politicians can't even remember what they did a few months ago, so I'm going to give myself some slack. Now, as Lindsay said, I graduated from Rutgers 30 years ago this month. Most of the people in this room weren't even born yet. Back then, things were very, very different, both on campus and in the world at large. Things we take for granted today, things that are just second nature to us now, or that we can't imagine living without, weren't always so. 30 years ago, we gathered around televisions to witness the first same-sex kiss on a daytime soap opera. There were so few movies with lesbian or gay characters that going to one was an event. 30 years ago, we often said lesbian or gay with caution and sometimes hesitation, possibly mentioned bisexual, and barely uttered anything having to do with gender. 30 years ago, Fraternity Row was a precarious, dangerous place for lesbian and gay students to walk. At Rutgers 30 years ago, there was no Gabriel, there was no Center for Social Justice, and there was definitely no rainbow graduation. 30 years ago, there was no Will and Grace, or Jack and Karen, no Ellen Show, no Orange is the New Black. 30 years ago, there were Melissa Etheridge and George Michael, Elton John and George Takei, but they were in the closet. Gay characters on TV were, for the most part, either invisible or they were stereotypes. So 30 years ago, the AIDS crisis was in full swing. And although we were aware of how HIV spread, there was criminally little that the federal government was doing to address the crisis. President Reagan wouldn't even say the words gay or AIDS until several years into the epidemic. There was no real treatment, and the drugs that did exist were experimental at best. Although we weren't aware of any cases on campus at the time, in New Jersey, New York, across the country and around the world, gay men were getting sick and dying by the thousands. On campus, we got some information from Student Health Services, but most of the education we received was from our own research and initiatives. And remember, there was no World Wide Web then. The fear of AIDS was real, and it tinged how our community was perceived and how we perceived ourselves. 30 years ago, the main lesbian and gay student group on the New Brunswick campuses was the Rutgers University Lesbian Gay Alliance, or the Alliance for short. The word queer was an epithet. University support for our community was just starting to show signs of life. We had a very small handful of out professors, including Alliance advisor Cheryl Clark, a proud Black lesbian dean at Rutgers College, and Jim Anderson, Associate Dean of the School of Communication, Information, and Library Studies. Occasionally, we would hear through the grapevine of some administrator or staff who was gay or lesbian, but most felt too unsafe coming out for personal or professional reasons. And yet, despite these dark ages conditions, we still found each other. We held weekly meetings and events, ran a peer support hotline, and found opportunities to support each other in coming out proud. And 30 years ago, notwithstanding, we've always found each other. It might not have been safe or easy, but love has always found a way. There have always been people who took a risk to make their lives better, to live their truth, to simply be, no matter how revolutionary they might have seemed at the time. In the fall of 1969, just months after the Stonewall riots, the Student Homophile League was established by several students, including Lionel Cuffey. Like its many successors, the League served as both an advocacy group and a social outlet. So as I said before, in the fall of 1987, then President Blaustein sent a letter to every student, highlighting most of the university's non-discrimination policy and encouraging everyone to treat each other with respect. But he left out sexual orientation in his list, even though it had been part of the official university policy since 1981. As the newly minted co-presidents of the Alliance, Susan Billmeyer and I felt it was important to bring this omission to President Blaustein's attention, and so we did so in a short letter. A month went by, and there was no response. So, with the help of Ron Nieberding, a graduate student in political science, we wrote a much longer letter, this time listing our grievances and asking for specific remedies that we wanted the administration to carry out. President Blaustein took over 2 months to reply, but it was worth the wait. His response indicated that he and his administration were taking us seriously. His letter to us was comprehensive, addressed our specific grievances, and led to the formation of the President's Select Committee for Lesbian and Gay Concerns. Made up of representatives from all parts of the university community, the committee was charged with researching and recommending changes necessary to create a more equitable, safe, and open campus for lesbian and gay students, faculty, and staff. Over the next several months, we crafted letters, wrote articles in school papers, and held news conferences and town hall meetings. We got faculty and staff involved. I think I got some studying done, although I'm not so certain. And in the fall of 1989, the committee released its report called In Every Classroom, which became a blueprint for the changes that we wanted to implement. The committee identified 5 main objectives: establish an Office of Lesbian and Gay Concerns, incentives for the creation of new, more inclusive interdisciplinary curriculums, sensitivity training for faculty, students, and staff, creation of safe space, and so important to Dean Anderson, the committee's chair, equity in access to benefits and services, which were automatically accorded to opposite-sex married couples, but would take years to be given to same-sex couples, long after Dean Anderson became fed up and quit his long career at Rutgers. So what changed? Visibility increased on TV and pop culture. More former military and sports figures came out. Marriage equality became a battle cry and then a reality. The language of marriage, family, inclusion, community support was something that straight people understood. Gay and lesbian couples who had been together for years or decades were suddenly coming out of the woodwork and becoming more visible. So today, when a viable presidential candidate runs as a proud, openly gay man with a husband who kisses him on stage in front of thousands, you'll understand if I take a step back and take it all in and take stock of where we've been and where we're going. You are the future of LGBTQ community and leadership. And in the same way that you are digital natives, you are queer rights natives. So in the same way that you help your parents with their phones because they didn't grow up with them and they may not understand how to send an animated GIF via text message, you are also being tasked with something much more important, helping and leading your elders to understand this new landscape that you both inherited and are creating. We are about to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall riots in New York City, riots that history tells us were led by transgender people of color. They were tired of police raids of their safe spaces, fed up with getting arrested for simply being who they are, and moved to action by the knowledge that by giving themselves permission to act together, they have the power to change the system. You are part of the generation of people who never knew a time when positive role models weren't on TV, in movies, in songs. You are part of the first generation who knows for a fact that you can marry the person you love if you choose to. Your generation speaks up and speaks out in unprecedented numbers. The closet still exists, but it's clear to people of my generation that the door hinges are a little less stuck and that people are coming out at younger and younger ages. So I talked about what it was like 30 years ago, and you know what it's like now, but what about the future? What will Rutgers and our country and our world look like 30 years from now in terms of queer rights? What part will you play in making that change happen? What struggles will we still have? Will coming out be irrelevant, or will it still be a central component of our personal stories? How will you look back on today? In some ways, it feels like we're going backwards at this moment in our country's timeline. Despite promises of being the best candidate for the LGBTQ community, the current occupant of the White House has championed regressive policies that are leaving out our transgender siblings in schools and the military. He has also created an atmosphere of fear, divisiveness, racism, and xenophobia, and those things directly connect to anyone who is perceived as different. The Methodist Church recently reaffirmed the church's Book of Discipline, which prohibits clergy from performing same-sex marriage and ordaining LGBTQ people. And just last week, the current administration gave healthcare providers the green light to discriminate against LGBTQ patients if they felt treating them went against their religious practice. Still, I'm optimistic that things will be better. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." We are doing many right things to assure that 30 years from now, LGBTQ equality will be solidified and codified in our society. To be sure, the changes necessary to make that a reality will not simply come to us. Religion and political and regional differences will continue to present challenges to the cause of true equality. We must continue to be impatient, continue to fight, continue to come out and come out and come out. Coming out is the single most important thing that you can do as a queer person. It's far more difficult to demonize and dehumanize someone you know and love. Your life is better when you share your true self with the world than when you hide it. So we must keep coming out. And when you give yourself permission to come out, you give other people permission as well. If I have any wisdom at all to pass on to you, let it be the knowledge that in no uncertain terms and without conditions, you matter. Perfect timing. Coming out is simply a manifestation of that statement. You matter so much that you're not going to hide who you are. Black lesbian poet Audre Lorde said, "Your silence will not protect you." That phrase, perhaps more than any other, has guided my own coming out process over the years. If you see injustice, speak up. You must speak up. If you encounter unequal treatment, you must say something. If you are ever made to feel less than because of who you are, you must counter that with a bold declaration and a deep sense of understanding that the accuser is wrong, not you. Your silence will not protect you. It's amazing, amazing, amazing to see that the seeds that we planted 30 years ago, and certainly the seeds that were planted before then, have turned into this. I don't think any of us had any idea back then that the rapid progress we've witnessed, even in the last 10 years, would ever occur. These changes happened not just because of what my predecessors and my contemporaries did, but because of our many, many successors who saw what we had done and thought, we can do even more. So my friends, this is how I will leave it with you. What do you see today, and how can you improve upon it? What injustice have you witnessed or experienced yourself that requires a challenge, a new approach, a better way? The connections between sexism, racism, and homophobia are clearer than they've ever been. People who face discrimination invariably have one thing in common. Who they are is somehow perceived as a challenge to the status quo. Whatever the underlying excuse, religion, politics, fear of difference or change or loss of power, we cannot allow our existence to be the problem that needs fixing. Because the truth is, we've always been here, and we always will be. For those who are being recognized tonight for their activism on campus, thank you for continuing the tradition. For those who are here supporting the LGBTQ students, thank you for being allies. I'm excited for what you will discover and how you will change and be changed. Most of all, I'm glad you're here and to be with you at Rainbow Graduation, celebrating you and your peers. I want to end with these words that have nothing to do with what I just said, which I've used to conclude several Passover Seders over the years. Passover is the Jewish holiday that celebrates freedom from bondage and looking forward to better days. These words seemed appropriate here where we too are celebrating freedom. They are the words of essayist and environmentalist Edward Abbey, who coincidentally died 30 years ago. May your trails be crooked, winding, lonesome, dangerous, leading to the most amazing view. May your mountains rise into and above the clouds. May your rivers flow without end, meandering through pastoral valleys tinkling with bells, past temples and castles and poets' towers into a dark primeval forest where tigers belch and monkeys howl through miasmal and mysterious swamps and down into a desert of red rock, blue mesas, domes and pinnacles and grottos of endless stone, and down again into a deep, vast, ancient, unknown chasm where bars of sunlight blaze on profiled cliffs, where deer walk across the white sand beaches, where storms come and go as lightning clangs upon the high crags, where something strange and more beautiful and more full of wonder in your deepest dreams waits for you beyond that next turning of the canyon wall. Thank you.